Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Garen, and I'm a product designer that works on emerging markets projects here at Google.
And I'm Tracy, a researcher that works on emerging markets at YouTube.
And we're super excited that you're joining us this afternoon to talk and learn about design for new internet users. Most recently, Tracy and I spent the last few years working on YouTube Go, which is a new version of YouTube, a new app that's been designed and built from the ground up for new internet users in countries like India. And you may have heard about this in the keynote back on Wednesday that was announced as part of the Android Go operating system. So if you're interested in designing apps that work great on Android Go or just work great for new internet users in general, then we're glad you're here. This talk is for you. This is important because the majority of people coming online, and actually the majority of people online right now, are in emerging market countries like India, Indonesia, Brazil, Nigeria. So if you're interested in going global, if you're interested in scaling any projects or products that you work on, it's important to consider their experiences and their contexts. So you might be thinking, well, Android is doing really well. There's this announcement that Android has over 2 billion users. Why do we have to do anything differently? We know from a host of qualitative and quantitative data that these internet users have very different experiences from those of us in this room. If you think about your first computer experience, it was probably a couple decades ago. You probably started using a desktop. You probably started connecting to the internet on that desktop. Your internet connection was fast. It's probably fast, reliable, and not too expensive. Right now, you probably have a cell phone that's pretty good, has a good screen. It's pretty fast. You're on Wi-Fi now, or you're on Wi-Fi at home, at work, or events like this. And when you're not on Wi-Fi, you've got pretty good access to mobile data to be online all the time. Compare this to the typical persona, or a typical persona of a new internet user. These folks are coming online with their first computer, their first internet experience being a smartphone. And it's oftentimes not this kind of fancy smartphone that we carry around. It's a lower-end smartphone, sub-$100, sub-$50 smartphone. These phones don't have great screens, don't have great contrast. They've got different kind of touch feedback. They've got low storage, low RAM. Oftentimes, they're running older versions of the operating system. They're not updating their apps frequently. They're using the internet on slow, expensive, flaky connections. And rarely, if ever, are folks using Wi-Fi. So will we still believe that universally we are all human, regardless of whether somebody is in India, Indonesia, Nigeria, United States, or London? We're all human. We do think it's really important that we consider the context, the different cultures, the different constraints, and different mental models that people bring to their internet experience. So over the past few years, we've invested a lot in thinking and figuring out what to do within Google, and we're excited to share a framework that we use within the company for building for new internet users. So in the course of this talk, we're going to talk about what it means to make your product usable, useful, and engaging for these types of users. We're going to give you very quick, very focused tips for each one of these components. So it's not going to be really nebulous, very designy. It's going to be very applied. And Tracy, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So our first bucket is usable, which focuses on the question, which is simple but challenging: can your product be used? And this bucket contains 3 components: cost, connectedness, and compatibility. So the first will be cost. We can start with a comparison. To afford 1 gigabyte of data in the United States, you would need to work a little bit over 20 minutes on average. But to afford the same exact thing in Indonesia, 1 gigabyte of data, you would have to work 316 minutes, so nearly 5.5 hours. So in markets like these, like Indonesia, data is much harder to come by, and for that reason, people savor every MB that much more. Also in these markets, most of the data is prepaid. Specifically in India, 95% of it is prepaid. And prepaid is where people buy fixed amounts of data up front. It's not an ongoing commitment, which we might be familiar with. So imagine going into a store and you buy a small paper card with a scratch code on the back that maybe you buy for 40 or 50 rupees, and you get 100 megabytes of data. That might last 1 day, 5 days, or even up to 28 days. So the behavior we're seeing is that people are buying denominations based on what they can afford, what they foresee as actually needing, and then they budget out their data use over that time period as necessary. So overall, data just feels like money in these markets. And compare this to what happens in the US. We usually buy a pretty high data cap plan by month, or we pay on every month, but we pretty much commit for a long time. And we're often connected to Wi-Fi, so we don't really worry about running out of data, maybe only at the end of the month. So what is Wi-Fi really like in these markets? Wi-Fi is actually rarely connected to because it's not that accessible. Globally, there's one Wi-Fi hotspot for every 150 people, and in India, it's a lot higher. There's about 31,500 hotspots overall in the country, so that means one hotspot for every 3,900 people. So if India wanted to meet the global average, they would have to install 8 million more hotspots. And the point here is that public Wi-Fi access is rare, making data, again, that much more precious and expensive. So now you might be thinking, Wi-Fi at home. Home is where we have the comfort of Wi-Fi. We're wrapped in the comfort of our own connection, our nice security blanket. We're not spending any of that mobile data. But this is not necessarily true in these types of markets. Currently, less than 2% of the entire population in India subscribe to a fixed-line broadband internet connection in their home. And if they are accessing internet at home, it's mostly through their mobile data on their mobile device. So in some, Wi-Fi access is still very rare, and we can't be assuming that Wi-Fi is going to come along at certain cadences for these users to fix whatever blockages or barriers they may hit in other connectivity states. So our tip here for the first component of cost, for data-heavy tasks, provide transparency and control over data consumption. The example on the right is actually from YouTube Go. After selecting a video, users are given the control to select their quality before watching. So they know upfront how much data they'll spend before committing to an action to either play or save the video. And we specifically say for data-heavy tasks because this type of transparency might be less important for smaller amounts that could be considered negligible, like 10 KB.
So the next component of the usable bucket is connectivity. We know that the internet is much slower in different parts of the world. The statistic is that in India, on average, the internet is 3 times slower than it is here in the United States. And most of the folks that are coming online for the very first time are coming online on the slowest connections, on cheap 2G, 3G connections, or overloaded free public Wi-Fi networks. But on top of it being slow, it's also important to consider the flakiness and the intermittency of the connections. So 65 to 80% of the time, 3G connection will, a round trip will actually work. There'll be uptime only for this amount of time. So you can imagine for seconds, for minutes, for hours at a time, even though you might have data, you might not be on airplane mode, the internet still might not be working for you. So it's crucial for those of us that are creating software to acknowledge and actually embrace these states of intermittency. As designers, we usually approach designing for these types of connections by looking at states. So typically, these are the states that we're often used to designing in Silicon Valley or in well-connected tech company environments. There's online state, which is considered the ideal state. Sometimes we think about partial loading states, and oftentimes we'll design error states as well. So a typical mock might look like this for us, or a typical flow of mocks or designs might look like this for us. You might move from one online mock to another online mock to another online mock, and that might be how we design how an app experience actually is. Maybe you design an error case as well. But this isn't really comprehensive. This doesn't actually meet the needs or doesn't portray the experience of a new internet user. So we've actually added a few other states to make this more comprehensive. In addition to considering the online state as ideal, we also think about the offline state as ideal, both because connections are flaky and because connections are expensive, so people turn off their mobile data frequently. In addition to loading being in progress, partially loading, we also have loading started, just to let folks know that something is actually happening. In addition to having an error content, we also have a state that portrays when you're offline and there just is no content. It's not a problem if you don't have connectivity, and it's not a problem if nothing is cached on your device. So if you use this kind of framework and you're walking through the design of a product, you end up with a life cycle that looks kind of like this. You're offline, you don't have any content, you switch it on, the loading starts, there's partial loading that's happening, then you're in a full online state, and then maybe you switch off your connection because it's flaky, or you switch off your connection, it's flaky, and then you go into an offline state. And we consider all of these states first-class citizens. So our tip for connectivity is to expect latency by designing offline loading, retry, and success experiences. Make great connectivity an edge case. So oftentimes we're used to designing edge cases as when there's no network. Have no and slow networks be your primary use cases, and have great connectivity be the edge case. The example that we have here is Chrome's offline page, which has recently added a download page later button. So not only does Chrome work offline and give you helps to figure out what's going on, but there's also an action that you can take on this page on this piece of content. Another example for this tip is Google Search. Google Search has launched a new feature where when you're offline or when you're on a flaky connection and the connection to Google doesn't work, you can search for something, and then Google Search will give you a notification of the content when it's ready. So you can turn to Google Search in great connectivity, and flaky connectivity, or no connectivity, and still count on getting an answer back. The final component of the usable bucket is compatibility. And oftentimes when we talk about compatibility for emerging markets or for new internet users, we talk about operating systems, hardware, software, and all of those are very important. For all the developers in the audience, these are important things to focus on. But I want to talk about something that's actually design related, which is that half the phones in India are sold. Half the phones in India right now are being sold that they're less than $100, and actually many of them are $30, $40, $50 phones as well. And as you can imagine, a $50 phone doesn't really have the same type of screen, doesn't have the same touch feedback, doesn't have the same contrast, doesn't have the same resolution as an expensive premium device screen does as well. It's also got lower processing. On top of that, because phones are expensive, people keep using broken phones. Just because a phone breaks doesn't mean they go out and buy a new phone. Oftentimes, broken phones are used, and when a new phone comes, the broken phone will still be used by another family member or by somebody in a more remote or more rural location. So it's important that we understand that low cost and broken phones are actually part of the ecosystem in which people are using our products. Material design provides a variety of affordance options, and it's always being revised, and there's more affordances that are being added. And so we encourage you to choose the types of affordances that make most sense for these types of phones. The tip here is to design clearer, larger, farther apart affordances to prevent mistaken taps caused by bad and broken screens and high contrast environments. You'll see the example here is from YouTube Go. There's a modal, there's two buttons. The buttons are not just text buttons. We didn't choose to use that affordance option. We chose to use big buttons with contrast, high contrast, big background, and big backgrounds. And this ends up being easier to see when you're in the sunlight or when you're using a screen that isn't as great.
Yeah, and to add something too, what we've learned really strongly in our user research is that pairing together icon and text can really help people understand and remember what an affordance does. You can consider each item, the icon and the text, as compensating for each other for any little bit of each that might get inevitably lost in translation. So now we move on to the second bucket of useful. This contains also the second set of components: culture, content, and commerce, evaluating, is your product valuable? Not just if it can be used, but is it also providing good use to the users? So the first is culture, and culture manifests in numerous ways, but we're just going to explore one branch of it for time purposes. So before search engines existed, there were sites like this, like DMOZ, which was like a portal to the internet, a directory of the internet's top-level content. And whether you knew what you wanted to search for or didn't, you'd start with a related category and go from there. But now we've evolved more into this very familiar format of searching to all of us, which is arguably a little less guided. But this works for us because we had portals like DMOZ help us build a really strong mental model for what lived on the internet and how to find it with the high-level categories and then the subcategories. And studies have actually shown that your mental models and your visual preferences are heavily shaped and affected by the physical landscapes you grow up in and the environments you grow up in. So why can't this be applied to digital environments too? We can't assume that everyone coming online who hasn't had this DMOZ-type background has the same mental model of searching. It can be really hard to know what you want to search for and also to formulate a query. imagine how intimidating it could be to form a query in your second, third, or fourth language and then hope to find some semblance of a relevant result come up afterwards. So our tip for this bit of culture is to show the breadth of what's possible in your product. Don't assume an existing mental model. The example we have here is actually Google search itself on this mobile device. So there are options to discover not just particular categories, but you can also dive directly into news content. You can find out the current weather before even worrying about typing. And typing can still be very hard on mobile devices. Another example are categories within the Google Play Store. Again, this screen guides users to show what the Play Store contains, and it clearly shows the various categories with matching icons on the side. The next component is content, and one way, just one way that content manifests is with language. Statistics on English speaking ability can be pretty unreliable, but it's generally accepted that about 30% of the population in India can speak English, and a third of that have some semblance of reading and writing aptitude, so 10% overall. And this is a really interesting statistic to consider alongside the fact that a lot of users in these markets and globally use their Android OS in English, despite it not being their first language and despite not fully understanding written English. So another thing we can't assume is that users in these markets will use interfaces in their native language, if that's even offered as an option. And we also can't assume that they want to type in their native script. So we need to work on improving our English UIs. Our tip here is to simplify language. Short, simple, direct for maximum clarity. And with this, to avoid very culturally specific phrases like shucks. Most of the examples we've been showing so far are examples of what to do. And we want to show a quick example here of a screen that may not work so great in other markets. This is a past YouTube onboarding flow that said, "New awesomeness awaits." And the word awesomeness doesn't really mean awesome or really anything in other vernaculars.
Finally, the last component of the useful bucket is commerce. And oftentimes when we talk about commerce and new internet users, we talk about forms of payment because so many economies run on cash. That's important for your product to consider from your business standpoint as well. But we want to talk about a UI-specific design example as well. And that's around sachet economics, sachet marketing. So sachets are small little packets of consumer goods like shampoo or detergent. And what they are is they're really cheap, so people can go and buy them. And this allows folks to get a sense of what the product is and try it out at a very low cost. They can try the experience a little bit before they commit to buying something even more. So instead of buying a big bottle of shampoo, they'll buy a single one-time use sachet of shampoo. And we can actually bring this learning back into how we design digital experiences as well. And our tip here is to allow people to try before they buy, providing tastes of experiences before you want them to commit to them. The example here that we're showing is a website of Flipkart. Flipkart is a big e-commerce company in India. And what we're not showing here, actually, is the Flipkart Android app. Good Android app, great Android app, but Flipkart has heavily invested in a web presence as well. So for folks that don't really know what Flipkart is, that don't want to invest in the data and the storage and the battery to download an app, they can go poke around the website to get a sense of what the app is before they commit to downloading the app. Another example of this is within YouTube Go, where when you tap on a video, before you choose to play or download the video, we show you a little preview of what's inside. We're not going to give away the entire video, but we show you a sense of what you'll be getting if you choose to spend the MBs to download it. Keep in mind, like Tracy said, data feels like money for a lot of folks, so it's not just spending money that feels like money. It's also spending data, it's spending limited storage that folks have on their devices, spending limited battery.
So the final bucket of this framework is engaging. Does your product delight by being social, sensorial, and surprising? In this context, social touches on the fact that the cultures in these types of emerging markets is collectivistic. It's not individualistic. They rely on human networks to fetch information, to learn new things, to discover. Friends are their search engine. For us, Google is our search engine. And there's nothing wrong with that, but considering how we fetch information with search engines, while we are leveraging the other people's knowledge on the internet, it's still very often an individual experience. Additionally, content like a funny video is very valuable social currency in these types of environments where new online content is a lot harder to search for and therefore a lot harder to access. Our tip here is to encourage the sharing of experiences. Don't just design for the individual, but for the community as well. If you allow people to show off to their friends and family, it really bumps up the social currency of your entire app. In this example, YouTube provides a pretty clear shared afforance centered underneath the video and the title, so it makes the action really easy to discover and act upon at that moment that you realize you want to share this content. This is just one way, though, that a product has encouraged sharing. Our second example is the peer-to-peer sharing feature within YouTube Go, which allows people to transfer videos or social currency to any friend nearby with very, very minimal use of data. The second component is sensorial. So not all cultures embrace what we deem this minimalistic aesthetic that seems to be quite coveted in Western cultures. And why it's not always coveted in other cultures could be due to a lot of reasons, be it traditions, resources, beliefs, or what have you. But in these markets and cultures, you'll see a lot of different uses of color, patterns, and designs that can connote a feeling of vibrancy or energy to our Western eyes. So for instance, here we see a comparison of clothing and textiles across 3 different countries that differ vastly from each other and also from Western markets too, be it the context in which they're wearing the clothes, how they're crafted, the colors, the meanings behind the patterns, etc., many more things. Another really interesting example is information density with respect to high context and low context environments. The center image is from a really interesting study that showed that users in Indonesia preferred icons that depicted more of the surrounding context of the object and more detail in the icon depictions, whereas users in the United States preferred the more abstract, simple icons or more low context designs. The images on the sides are common scenes that you'll see walking the streets in India, very dense signage or stores that are organized maybe how you would consider your storage room is organized. And the main point is that what's considered clutter to us or not clean and simple design could be the preference for others. A lot of these differences can also be really overwhelming, but ultimately we say they should be embraced. So our tip really is don't westernize everything. That's not really what people want. Nod to local aesthetics by drawing inspiration from regionally popular products or hiring local designers. This will make your product feel more relatable, that you care and pay attention to the cultural aesthetics. A really great example here is Google Allo stickers. That team hired local designers in India to create these downloadable sticker packs. And not only can you see the pretty clear inspiration of local aesthetics, but also the addition of common transliterated phrases.
And our last component for the engaging bucket is surprising. This is the one that's the most nebulous. What we strongly recommend is to surprise and delight by doing one thing or just a focused set of things very, very well. It's really easy to think of emerging markets, to think of new internet users as having a lower tolerance or being less savvy, and that's absolutely wrong. Just because they're new to the internet does not mean they're new to life, does not mean they're willing to settle for less. They've got different mental models, different desires, but they also they desire, they want great experiences. And because many of them are coming online for the first time, they're trying to evaluate how they use their technology. They'll try something out, and if it doesn't make sense, they'll move on to the next thing. So at an umbrella level, it's absolutely critical that you keep your product focused, not have too many gimmicks, and just focus on doing this one thing, delivering the value very clearly. People are critical. They're looking for great experience, looking for great experiences that resonate with them, and we think that this is the way to do it. This is the way that a lot of product development happens at Google as well, where we focus on figuring out what this value makes sense and just being very focused on delivering that. So thank you for following along as we've discussed these different components of these different buckets, making your product usable, useful, and engaging. In India alone, over the next couple years, 100 million people are going to be coming online every single year. So let's not forget that while we're all human, while we all care about our families, we have similar aspirations for our families, our lives, there are many different cultures, different context constraints, and mental models that we can accommodate for as well. We think that they deserve great internet experiences, and we're excited that you're here, that you're thinking about this. And if there's one piece of advice that we can give you, other than following this framework, it's to listen to your users. And whether that means going to a place where your product is popular or you want to be popular to conduct some user research, or to building feedback mechanisms into your product, even just looking at the Google Play reviews and looking at where the feedback is coming from, which geographies they're coming from. We think that focusing on the user is the way to help understand how to deliver that focused value. Thank you very much. And this framework is published online in the ACM Interactions magazine, so you can go ahead and check that out at this short link. We also have a website, developers.google.com/billions. And we'll leave you with this framework and these tips all on one slide, and we invite any Q&A as well. So please come up to the microphones in the aisles. Thank you.
Thank you.